Hi, and welcome to Steel Talk. My name is Danny Stain, and I work in the steel fabricating space. And in this show, I reach out to industry insiders and try and get their handle on how they're navigating this rapidly changing landscape. I think we're all struggling with this new reality and the stresses that it's imposing on our business, on our family, and ourselves personally. In the upcoming shows, I will not only be chatting to fabricators here in the USA, but also around the world. And I'll also be chatting to manufacturers and service providers in our industry to understand how this is affecting the entire industry, to see changes that they've implemented and where they see this going. And in terms of upcoming shows, on Tuesday of next week, I'll be speaking with William Giacometti. He's the CEO of MEP and HydeMech, and he has been dealing with the COVID-19 virus in his factories in China, Italy, Canada, the United States, and Brazil. So I'm sure you need to tune in there because he's got a lot to offer in terms of the reality of companies that have been dealing with this for way longer than we have. And then on Thursday of next week, I'm chatting with Tom Clash. He's an accountant, and he's been examining what the stimulus package has to offer our industry. So please stay tuned in and make sure that you subscribe to our channel. In these discussions, I'm sure that we'll share valuable insights and reveal some creative actions that others are taking in their operations. So without further delay, I would like to welcome my latest guest, Steve Chasse, the CEO of Chasse Steel, based in Hudson, New Hampshire. Welcome, Steve.
Hello, Danny. How are you?
How's it? I'm doing well. How are you doing, Steve?
I'm doing very good.
For those of our viewers who might be wondering where Hudson is, it's slightly less than an hour sort of northwest of Boston, possibly the coldest corner of the United States. Do I have that right, Steve?
Yeah, it can get cold. It can get very cold.
Well, how was this winter and how did it treat you and what are the conditions outside right now?
It's raining right now. It was very nice yesterday. It's supposed to be okay tomorrow. This winter was pretty mild. We were able to keep working all winter. Nothing really got delayed, so it worked out okay. But we can get quite a bit of snow around here.
Right. I think our friendship goes back 17 or 18 years. I'm quite embarrassed to
Sure.
say that I haven't been to your shop in a long, long time, but I've heard from my colleagues that it doesn't even resemble anything like it was when I first met you. Can you give me some sort of idea of what you've been doing over the past 15 to 18 years and how much you guys have grown in that time?
Sure. I think 2005, roughly, we met. We bought an Ocean Avenger, and that was our first automated piece of equipment. Since then, at that point, we were, I think, in a 15,000 square foot building. At this point, we're adding on a 38,000 square foot addition to a building that's already been added on to, and we're close to 100,000 square feet of space right now. At the time, we were probably 20, 30 employees. We're about 150 employees right now. So we've had considerable growth, and a lot of that comes from adding automation, drill lines, saws, that type of thing. So that's helped us grow, allowed us to grow.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, that's a 5 times growth. I mean, that's really a tremendous success story. I believe that you run your own of that group, that 150 staff. A big portion of that is in the field in erection. Is that correct?
Correct. We have close to 50 people in the field, cranes, equipment. So we do everything ourselves. We fabricate structural, we fabricate miscellaneous, and we erect both. And then, of course, we supply cranes, equipment, that type of thing. So yeah, we have a big field staff.
So do you mainly service the New England area or do you travel farther afield?
Not New England, 100-mile radius from our shop in Hudson for the most part, into Massachusetts, up into Maine, over into Vermont,
That's quite
all in New Hampshire.
that's quite an amazing amount of steel consumption in that fairly small domestic area. Must
There
be,
is.
yeah, that's quite fascinating. So what is the type of work that you chase?
We sell basically packages, full gamut, schools, retail, a lot of housing, a lot of residential, whether it be apartment buildings, hotels. That's a big part of the market right now around here. But anything, warehouses. But we sell the whole package, like I said, the structural, the miscellaneous, and the steel erection.
So if we look back to the beginning of 2020, long before we even knew anything about coronavirus, what was your forecast for the year, and how does it look now? And how much backlog did you start with back then, and what sort of backlog do you have now?
Um, as strange as it may sound, through everything we've been through lately, nothing has changed too much. The backlog is the same. The sales are the same. We haven't laid anyone off. Luckily, I don't know what the future will bring. The virus hasn't hit New Hampshire as hard as it has hit other New England states and New York. Hopefully, it's not coming into this area as much as the other areas. I feel very bad for the people in Massachusetts and New York, but luckily we haven't been hit too hard yet. Um, I believe things will stay fairly steady going through this, but again, it could change. It could change tomorrow.
Have you had any infections in your own staff or on any of the job sites that you're working?
We've had a few scares, but they didn't turn into being a true infection, virus infection. One job, we got notification today that they shut down the job about an hour ago, actually. Shut down the job about a half hour from here. That someone that was working there was infected. They'll open the job up again on Monday after they clean it. There's been a couple of instances like that recently, but that's about it. We don't do a lot of work in Boston. We'll do work around Boston, but Boston got shut down right away.
Right.
But every place else is still working. Construction is still happening. Just have to be very careful.
Um, you talk about construction still happening. Am I mistaken? I thought that very recently there was a change to the, let's call it the essential construction being a part of essential services, and there have been some changes in some areas. Am I wrong on that?
No, you are correct. In Massachusetts, state work and housing continues. Just about everything else is shut down. Um, like I mentioned earlier, a good amount of the work we're doing right now is housing, is residential, whether it be nursing, elderly living, hotels, that type of thing. So a lot of that work is still continuing. Fortunately, I'd say 90% of our work right now is in New Hampshire. Nothing has stopped in New Hampshire. Everything is still considered essential in New Hampshire.
Well, I sincerely hope it carries on that way. But I was just taking a look at some of the metrics by which we're sort of measuring the sort of daily spread of the virus. And I was just looking at, yeah, Massachusetts and Connecticut in terms of,
Mm-hmm.
let's call it the metric of deaths per million of population. I think they're number
Yeah,
5 and 6 in the United States. So,
yeah, yeah,
they're right on your doorstep. That has to be of some
they are.
concern.
It is. It's very concerning. New England is such a tight area. New England is the size of some of the bigger states. So, we my back door is 20 minutes, from Massachusetts. We're 45 minutes from Boston, so we're right there. For some odd reason, we haven't seen it yet, whether it be the testing or the news media. We just haven't seen the amount of infections that Massachusetts has seen and New York has seen, Connecticut.
Yeah, are
But
your
again, like I
states
said, that could change tomorrow. I'm
Sure.
sorry.
Are your states under sort of some sort of stay-at-home kind of order? Is it voluntary, or is it what are you seeing there?
No, we're under a stay-at-home order. Only essential businesses can be open. Um, Restaurants, everything's closed, just like most of the other states. Nobody's out and about. Most people are staying home, and a lot of people are abiding by the rules. That's could be part of the reason that we're not seeing it right now. Everybody's very cognizant of what's going on, and you see a lot of people wearing masks. Uh, it's because I would say it's because we've been watching it for so long now that we see what's going to happen. We can see we're in the end of the United States when it comes to the infections. It seems like it came across the country from California, Washington, all the way across. We're at the East Coast, so. But again, things could change quickly. It could be a whole different story that if we were talking this time next week.
Yeah, absolutely. I was enjoying a wonderful annual general meeting in Hawaii with one of my business partners and flew back on the 29th of February via Seattle. And I got
Hmm.
off the plane in Seattle, and we started to hear a bit of this while we were actually in Hawaii. We started to hear a little bit about COVID, and got off the plane, and there was 100% of the airport was in masks. That was
Yeah.
basically March 1. Here
Hmm.
we are, April 9th in Florida, and that message still hasn't got you. So
Yeah.
you can sense that different communities respond faster, or perceive the threat to be more real or less real.
Right.
Um,
Right.
we had these young kids on a spring break over here behaving badly, thinking that it wouldn't apply to them, and we've seen the absolute the wreckage that they have strewn behind them as they've left Fort Lauderdale beaches and headed back home across the country. Um,
Sure.
in 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 terms of the orders that are being affected in your areas, are these being mandated by governors? Are they being mandated by mayors or county judges? How are you getting your edicts about how to behave?
Governor Governor Sununu. He's handled the situation very well as far as I'm concerned. We don't have a lot of mayors. There's only a few cities in New Hampshire,
Okay.
so we're a very small state. So everything's coming from the governor.
And yeah, I understand you're basically focusing on New Hampshire. Are any of the borders
Hmm.
between the New England states closed at all?
No, the borders aren't closed, um, as far as I know. I think certain towns, certain cities in Massachusetts, maybe,
Okay.
um, but the actual border itself isn't at this point.
Okay. Yeah, Florida, by the way, just so you know, we've shut down our borders here. So, we're starting to see this roll out in different places, and it's being done piecemeal as I think the threat is perceived to be elevated. Um, in my discussion with my previous listener, this was Chad Hoke from Big Four Steel Services, sorry, in Houston. Um, he was talking about job sites, and this is something that I want to pose to you. Um, if there are overruns in terms of costs related to extensions or delays on job sites, do you have an ability to get compensated for that?
I don't believe so. Um, Not the way the contracts are written. You'd have to have an owner. A lot of our work is private. You'd have to have an owner that was willing to pay that. Um, Luckily, so far we haven't had anything happen, so we haven't had to deal with it. We'll see what the future brings,
So,
but I
are
don't
you
believe that's going to happen.
bidding on work at the moment?
Oh yes, we are. So there's an awful lot of work to bid on. It's like I said earlier. It hasn't changed considerably. There's still a lot to bid on. We're still being awarded jobs. There's a resilient type of person around here where they know what's going on. They do what it takes to make sure they are safe, but
Yeah.
everybody still continues to conduct business and keep going.
So, in terms of work that you're bidding on right now, are you making provisions for, let's call it extenuating circumstances? Do you have anything built in, or do you just feel that this is not necessary?
It's not something that would allow you to win a job at this point in time. Um, you could add in whatever you wanted
Okay.
to take care of you financially, but you'll be sitting at home without any work if you tried to do that.
Yeah, I can imagine that
So,
margins are quite thin everywhere.
yeah.
If erection does get stopped in your area, obviously that trickles down into the fab shop. Are you at full speed right now in your shop?
Yeah, we're 100%. Nothing's really changed. We have a 38,000 square foot addition we could put up on our building if things slowed down that quickly. Um, but if the state came in and said no, construction is no longer essential and everything gets shut down, then we have more to think about.
Okay. So
I don't think it's going to happen, but
how many do you have in your fab shop, and how many do you have in the office doing administration?
we have two shops. We have a structural shop and a miscellaneous shop. There's roughly 40 to 45 people in the two shops. The office is 30 some odd people. Remainders in the field.
Okay.
Out of the 20 to 30 people in the office, I'd say half of them are working from home right now. All the detailers, all the project managers.
Okay.
But they're really the only ones that are working from home.
And then in the fab shop, have you implemented any procedural changes in how to sort of mitigate the spread of the virus?
Yeah, every morning there's a survey each shop foreman conducts with every employee, asking them specific questions recommended by the CDC about fever, sore throat, that type of thing. And they have to sign off on that every morning. If somebody comes in sick, fever, they'll have to go home. They're paid, of course, but they can't come to work. We're doing the same thing in the field with all the erectors. The foreman on every site conducts a survey every morning. If anybody's sick, they'll have to go home. And again, they'll be paid, but they have to go home.
Okay. And I'm guessing that if you're still flat out, it means the supply chain is working well.
Luckily, everything is, we did have a few delays. One of our joy suppliers shut down for a short amount of time, and then they were allowed to go back online. Delayed a job slightly, but it wasn't really a concern. Everybody, contractors that we deal with understand what's going on. We have been able to get steel on a daily basis. Luckily, the supply chain hasn't stopped. If the supply chain does stop, things will change.
Yep. Is there a way to limit the interaction of the people visiting your shop, delivering steel or delivering consumables? Do they have a place where they offload, or how do you? I mean, there seems to be so much interaction,
Yeah.
points of contact that happen when you have deliveries.
Sure. The office is locked completely. No visitors, no salespeople. Nobody's in the office but the essential people that are here to carry day-to-day operations of the business. As far as deliveries, our state, we're not signing slips. We're not, there's not a lot of interaction between people. Everybody's keeping their distance. It's worked out okay. Even going, coffee truck shows up, there's huge safety procedures, even for the coffee truck driver when he comes to the shop. But we've done everything we possibly can to keep everybody safe, short of telling them to go home.
Yeah. All right. I think we've got a handle on what you're doing and how your work is going currently, but let's take a switch and let's look
Sure.
at structural steel in New England moving forward. In a book I was reading recently, they referenced this Danish philosopher, Søren Kierkegaard, from the 19th century, and he said famously that life can only be understood looking backwards, but it has to be lived moving forwards. And I thought that was such a great insight. It's so easy to, with hindsight is always 2020. We know what we should have
Sure.
done, but looking forward, where most of us are into 4 weeks of coronavirus or dealing with this and the threat of it. Is there anything that you wish that you'd done over the previous years leading up to this that would have put you in a better position to handle something like this?
I don't think there's anything that anybody could do to put them in a better position to handle this, short of having no employees in your whole company and having robots run the business. But that's not this business. I think what we really need to do is learn from what's happening right now as quickly as we possibly can and make changes as quickly as we possibly can to go forward. This is a big learning experience for everybody, and it's not all bad. It's when we come out of this, we'll be a lot better off if we can continue to run the business. We'll have a lot of knowledge that happened from all this. And you'll be able to understand what could happen. So going forward, like you said, you can look back and change if you were able to look back. But going forward, we have knowledge now that we can put certain things into place. But going back to your first question, no, I don't think I would have changed anything. I think we're pretty well prepared to handle what's going on as long as it's in our control. Once it's out of our control, who knows what's going to happen.
Thanks for that insight, Steve. Yeah, I was listening to the weekly MetalCon webcast yesterday that pertains to the metal roofing industry. I'm actually surprised that AIC hasn't done something for its members. It'd be interesting for us to be listening to what our fellow colleagues are doing. In a survey they sent out to their members, 52% of them had projects that were shut down, with those people being in the Northeast. Obviously, for some reason, you somehow escaped that. They then also during this podcast they did a live poll, and they said of the people viewing, how many had applied for some of these financial provisions under the CARE Stimulus Act, the SBA and PPP funding, and only 35% had actually applied for this. Have you applied for anything yourself? That's the first question. Okay.
Yeah, we have the Payroll Protection Act. We applied for it the first day. We got our application in, and we'll see here within a few days how that works out. Whether we need to use it or not, that's a different story. But again, we can control what we can control. But once it comes out of our hands and we can control it, then we're going to need some help. Everyone else.
Yeah, I think this is the part that the second part of my question is, have you heard anything back?
We got an email stating that the SBA had received it, and we were in the queue. So it's positive.
Yeah. Of the people that were of the 35% who'd actually applied, only 3% of those applicants had actually received any funds yet. So we just have to see if there's an execution issue of trying to get the money to the people. I know that having seen this 5 times growth that you've had over the last 15 years, I know that you're a highly driven individual and you've been aggressively expanding your business. So my question is your business leveraged right now? Have you done this from retained earnings?
No, a lot of it is done from earnings. We have a fairly small debt. We have debt just like everyone else. But no, we're not highly leveraged. We're in pretty good shape. Real good. Yeah. A lot of it is done, through cash that we receive from the work that we've done. I don't like to take on too much debt like most other people in this business. We're all a certain type of person that runs a business like this. We all know what it takes to run a business like this, and there's a lot of risks involved. So it's not really a good idea to get too leveraged. But yeah, you do have to take some risk. You do have to borrow some money, and that's the only way you're going to grow.
Are you finding any delays in payments from your customers?
Yeah, they're holding on to it a little longer than they should be, which is usually the case anyways. So sometimes you have to pry it out of their hands. But all in all, we're getting paid. But it's no different than it's always like that. It's construction in general is a tough business. Steel fabrication is a tough business. Anybody that's in it knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, those that have stayed in it know it. Yeah, not everybody stays in it for that long. Yeah. Steve, I think not many of our viewers know, but you actually have a separate business that recently, within the last 2 years, launched a product that has taken the fabricating world by storm. It's a ALT automatic layout table for visually laying out handrail. And you've been exceptionally successful. You and John and Mike Evans have done a fantastic job. Congratulations, first of all, on that. It's a fantastic piece of equipment, and I'm thrilled to be able to represent it. But how are you seeing sales of that product in the industry at the current time?
It's slowed down a little bit, just like everything else in this economy right now. But we still have sold a few recently. It's called the Lightening Rail. We're still building them. And I'm ready when a lot of this dies down and it's over, we can start shipping machines, immediately. We received our patent on the machine actually about a month ago. So it is a patented machine now, patented product. Yeah, thank you. So, it works well, and it's still very active. Still very active.
Yeah, the people that have used it have had very favorable response. So yeah, congratulations. It's nice to be first to market with something that's usable. A lot of people have good ideas but don't execute on them, and you guys have done a fantastic job with that.
Thank you. I
Um,
appreciate that.
so let's look going further forward. You know, here's the part that I'm wrestling with. You're slammed. It hasn't
Hmm.
affected you yet. Chad Hoken in Houston, even in the middle of the oil, oil environment, even with depressed oil prices, totally slammed.
Hmm.
Is this coronavirus thing? Is this just a blip on the horizon, or does this have a long-term repercussion for our industry?
I think it's a blip. Um, I'm an optimistic person, and I will continue to think that way no matter what anybody says. Um, that's the only way we can survive. So yes, I'm going to say it's a blip. Um, what the future brings will tell us if I'm right or not. But I think it's a blip. I think we will continue on. We will be stronger than we were. We'll have to keep a close eye on this. What comes next year, it's going to come back around again. Hopefully by then somebody comes up with a cure, an antidote, which I'm sure they will. And then it'll be life, back to normal.
Well, if you don't
That's
mind,
my opinion.
if you don't mind, I'm just going to throw in let's call it the contrarian view, just so that we can sort
Hmm.
of wrestle with this ourselves. I
Sure.
really value your viewpoint because um, I'm seeing, and I think a few people are seeing human behavior actually changing even more rapidly now while we're doing everything digitally. Here we are, we're not chatting face to face, we're doing it through some technology. We seem to be buying everything online now. We already were doing that, but it seems to be accelerating and people are becoming more used to it. So malls and shopping centers, the demand on those, that square footage addition is surely going to shrink. And then I look at it from my own perspective. I travel extensively. I do about 120 flights a year. I'm just not sure when I'm going to be happy about standing in a TSA line, going through customs or whatever, getting into an airplane. So I would imagine that things like travel, which affects airport constructions or renovations, it affects hotel builds, all of those things. I think those things are definitely going to have a longer term dip to them, which must have some roll on effect to our industry. Or am I completely wrong on that?
No, that's your opinion, but possibly the airports will come up with a way to make it safer. They may need to build some safe rooms in the airports. Something will always be built. You know, that's evolution. Things will not stop. It will continue. So again, I'm an optimistic person, but people have to work. People can't sit at home and buy things all the time on a computer. They need to go out and get a job to get the money to buy those things on the computer. Where are they going to go work? They have to
Yeah,
work somewhere. They,
yeah,
they can go work for Amazon. They can go, there'll be Amazons that'll be built. Something will always be built.
sure.
So
Yeah.
that's my opinion.
Yep. So some areas will go down and slow down, and others
Oh,
will
sure. Yeah.
respond faster.
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of travel, I would like to see something implemented where you could get tested, and if you've actually been exposed to coronavirus and you survived, you now have an immunity. You walk around with a green badge or something like that, and that allows
Yeah.
you to get on a plane. But I
Yeah.
personally would hate to be standing in a TSA line, not knowing who I'm
Yeah.
standing around. I mean, think about it. I could be infecting the very
Yeah.
person next to me for all I know.
Sure. Sure.
So yeah, I
But
think it's going to, a lot of people are talking in the sporting arenas and stuff like that. When do we have high density activity again? When do we allow audiences or spectators to come back in a stadium? Is this a 2 month thing, a 6 month? Is this a year, 2 years? So Wuhan province in China, the origin of the outbreak, they were under quarantine for about 75 days and they've come out of it now. But we've seen a second province now just this week going into quarantine in China, and I wish I could remember the name. One of the northern provinces right on the border of Russia. So we're seeing this thing rolling around, and so while we think, hey, China's out of it, China's not out of it. One area's out of it, and this thing rolls on, and so
sure.
there's longer term impacts for not just China, but for everybody else as this stuff moves its way through.
Right. Um, they talk about, possibly when the warmer weather gets here, will it, it has an effect on the flu. Will it have an effect on the coronavirus? We'll find that out shortly as the warmer weather gets here. You're in Florida, it's warm there already. It hasn't had an effect. So, but we'll have to see. It'll be around for a little while. I'll think about it for quite a while, but I don't think it'll stop daily life unless the government stops daily life,
No,
for everybody in the country.
no, I don't think it's going to stop daily life at all. In fact, until
Yeah,
we're told what
yeah,
not to do, we carry
yeah,
on doing it as if it won't affect us. That's
sure,
kind of how we run
yeah,
our lives here.
right,
Let me
right.
let me talk about it on your on a personal situation. I believe your sister Laurie, she works with you in the company,
She does, yes,
and you also have two of your kids that are employed there.
yes. My son and my daughter,
And in what
and
capacity?
and my mother, my 81-year-old mother, actually
Oh, wow, wow.
works here also. Yeah, yeah.
And in
Try
what
to
capacity do
tell her to stay home. I'm sorry.
that's lovely. In what capacity do your kids work? What are their jobs?
My daughter's a receptionist. My son actually works ALT on the Lightning Rail tables,
Aha, very
um,
nice.
on building them and installing them. Um, and my mother's works in the office.
And then you have another daughter that's out in Salt Lake City. I believe they're also in a sort of stay-at-home, shelter-at-home kind of
Yes,
working.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
She moved out there a couple of years ago to go out and ski for a while, and she's a physical therapist. So,
Oh, very nice.
um,
Yeah,
but she's in the same.
that's a tough thing
Yeah,
to be a physical therapist. I can imagine it's
yeah,
like a dental hygienist or something
yeah,
that's
yeah,
person-on-person contact that you want to
yeah,
stay away from unless it's absolutely
yeah.
critical.
Right, right. So yeah, she's dealing with a lot of the same things we are right now. Um,
Okay. So it's
um,
just your wife and
exactly
you
the
at
same.
so just your
Yeah,
wife and you at home?
that's it. Yeah, that's it.
And do you
So
find that you're bringing some of the stresses that you're dealing with home?
I've been doing this for so long, I don't have any stresses anymore.
I wish I could say
I
the
try
same.
to I try to leave everything at work.
Good for
I
you.
try to be as optimistic as possible.
And so stuff that you do in your part time, you've always struck me as a guy that's very fit. I mean, do you work out? What do you do in your spare
Yeah,
time?
yeah, I exercise, I work out, and my wife and I both work around the yard. We have a big yard, and we're outside all the time. And um, it's not all work, but the mind never stops working when you're in a business like this. You just do different things.
Yeah, I don't think you have a 500% growth with just letting it happen on its own. I think there might be a little bit
No,
of direction happening there after hours.
yes, yes,
Well, Steve,
yeah,
I really appreciate you joining us here and giving us some insights of what you're dealing with there in New England. I sincerely hope that it doesn't move further north from the Boston area. I hope you somehow escape this unscathed. Um, Really pleased to you, your family, to your employees. I just wish you all that you be sensible, stay safe, and stay healthy.
Thank you, Danny. I greatly appreciate that, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate it, Steve. And thanks to all of you that have called in and emailed us with your suggestions. Very much appreciated your suggestions. We're implementing as many of your requests as possible. We're now broadcasting live twice per week. That's Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And as I mentioned to you earlier on in the show, that there are two very interesting speakers that will join our show next week. So be sure to join in. I hope you found it entertaining. Hopefully, there were some insightful takeaways. If you enjoy this episode, please give us a big thumbs up and click the subscribe button below. And until we see you again next week, please stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.